Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel, and in this video we'll go over the question, are you a web developer or a SaaS gluer? If you've been in the web development ecosystem for a while, you know that there are these two camps of people. Some people prefer to only use SaaS services, products to glue together and build a web application, and there's the other camp where web developers take pride and they like to build things themselves. Before we get started and we take a look at the pros and cons of web development and quote unquote SaaS gluing, I want to start by saying that this is not a moral or value judgment, and you should do what is more productive to you and the things that help you get towards your goals. And you shouldn't let other people tell you that you're quote unquote bad for doing something, whether that's building things from scratch. Some people might say that that's unproductive. You should just use a SaaS offering and build things together and glue things together to build a web application. And there's also the other camp that says that you're not quote unquote a true web developer, you're not a real, let's say, programmer if you use these SaaS offerings. So I don't want to get into that debate. Rather, I want to try and see what the benefits might be of going with either approach. And just as a disclaimer, I identify, let's say, more with a web developer. I prefer to build things myself, and I'm going to explain also why during this video. The first pro of SaaS Gluers is that you feel motivated by seeing an actually working web application sooner, and that lets you have that motivation to continue working on a web application, to continue building things as a programmer, and that is going to give you an advantage over other web developers that might like to start by learning the basics, and while they might be able to build a better foundation, you could argue that, I would say that people who prefer to use SaaS offerings are able to see how the entire web application works together much faster, because they are able to use a SaaS offering to build the authentication, build a dashboard with, for example, React, and then all of the functionality is offloaded to different services. So if you need notifications or background jobs, all of those kinds of things are going to be sent to a SaaS offering or multiple SaaS offerings. And because of that, it is much simpler to get started, to actually build something and see a working application that was built by yourself. Now, yes, all the pieces are not actually built by yourself, but if we take a look at that from that kind of perspective, then also we have a computer, for example, all of the pieces inside of the computer, you haven't built them yourself. If you use a framework like Laravel, for example, and you don't use a SaaS offering, then you're also not going to be building everything from scratch. So if you just look from this perspective, you know yourself and you know that you prefer to start seeing things right away and start building them, and that gets you going and that helps you learn more, then this is a pro of being a quote unquote SaaS gluer. The second pro is that you are more productive. Because you are using all of these services to build a web application, you'll be able to move much faster than someone who has to build all of those things by themselves, especially if you're not that experienced. I would say that if you already have a lot of experience with Laravel or with Rails even, or other frameworks that have all of these pieces included, then you might be able to be as productive as someone that is just gluing together SaaS offerings. But if you don't have that much experience, then you'll be much more productive by going with this approach. The last pro is that, like I said previously, it is simpler for beginners. If you're just getting started, doing things this way, while it might seem counterintuitive because you'll have a lot of complexity happening at the same time, you'll still be able to actually, like I said, build a web application that works, that has features, that has functionality, and that will start making your brain understand how all of these things are actually related to one another. So how a client works, how a server works, how background jobs work. And if you were to build all of these things by yourself, or even use frameworks that while they help you a lot, they don't help you as much as some of the SaaS offerings. In those cases, you are able to actually go much faster. Now, it's important to note here that you don't always have to actually feel these kinds of things when you are building web applications by gluing SaaS offerings together. If you know that you prefer a different style of learning, and I think this is what all of this boils down to. If you prefer a style of learning where you go through all of the theory and you go through each one of the basic things of building a web application, even you might even say of programming in general, if you want to learn about memory management, if you want to learn, for example, start with the C language or C++ and start from a more low level language, uh, if you know that you yourself prefer to learn things this way, then this might not really be true. These points might be true for a certain kind of person that learns in a certain kind of way, but not for you. So this is why it is very important for you to know yourself and know exactly if you prefer to learn things that way. Now, when I first got started with web development, honestly, there weren't that many SaaS offerings. And this idea of gluing SaaS offerings together wasn't really that much of a popular thing. They might have existed back then. Most of them were authentication services. So besides that, there wasn't this, I would call it Next.js approach of doing things, of just gluing things together. And because of that, I actually didn't use them, but I started from a much higher level of abstraction. Until recently, I didn't even understand some details about memory management, about how more low level languages work, only when I started learning Rust, and then also Go and a bit of Zig. Only when I started learning these languages did I understand how these things worked, but I started by using React and using a lot of higher level abstractions to be able to build web applications. So things like Rails, I've dabbled with that. I tried using Laravel, and I didn't really understand what was happening beneath the hood with even React. So if we think about a like how React actually re-renders things and all of the rules of React and all of those details that someone with a lot of experience understands about React. When I first got started with it, I didn't understand it, but I was able to build a dashboard with quote unquote fake data, with mock data, and start seeing things moving around the screen, and that motivated me a lot. And because of this, I think that if I were starting today, I would probably be using a lot of these SaaS offerings to glue together a web application rather than start from scratch. Now that I have some years of experience in the industry, I'm able to slowly start learning the more basic stuff and start learning how things work underneath the hood. And I now have the knowledge or the motivation, let's say, to do those kinds of things. And if I were starting um, with those basics things, I wouldn't be able to motivate myself because it would all be, let's say, very boring. Now let's take a look at the pros of being a quote unquote web developer instead of gluing SaaS offerings together. First, you feel motivated by building the individual pieces yourself. Um, Opposite to the other case, which is you feel motivated by seeing things actually happen. So here, if you like to tinker with things, if you like to actually get motivated by knowing that you actually build all of those small details, then this is going to be a pro for you. This will help you feel motivated by knowing that you put a lot of work into building something and you know exactly how everything works under the hood. Now, nowadays, I tend to oscillate sometimes to this kind of thinking and getting motivated by these kinds of things of trying to build authentication from scratch as much as I can, try to actually understand how memory management works. And this is also something that brings me joy, but there are people out there, you might be one of them, that only feel motivated by this. They don't really need to see something built out there. They don't even need to maybe see a project to completion to feel motivated by that. They sort of thrive just from the learning and from knowing that they were able to tinker with all the individual pieces that put together get us to a web application. So, like I said, the next pro is that you'll have more in-depth learning experience, and this is not only something that might be able to motivate yourself, but also this is something that is more of a fact, because you're going to actually build everything yourself from scratch. You'll understand things much better, especially at a later stage. So if you get started and you start sort of learning all of the small pieces of building a web application, you'll maybe spend 3 months, 6 months just to understand 10-20% of it. And I'm assuming there that you're actually going deep into all of the topics and learning them really in depth. So, but as you progress in your career, and as you start having more time as a web developer, uh, actually learning all of the things and doing everything yourself is going to give you a much more in-depth learning experience, because you'll have those, let's say, 5, 10, 15 years of experience. And with that time, you're actually going to take that time to investigate things and to actually learn them properly, which means that even if you were to actually use a SaaS offering to be more productive, to be able to ship something quicker, you'd still know exactly what was happening under the hood, and you'd be able to even debug things much more easily. So again, to recap, one of the pros of going this route is that you'll have a more in-depth learning experience. Finally, you'll also have more control over the web application. Because you're gluing SaaS offerings together, each one of these offerings has their own database, each one of these offerings has their own way of doing things, and you'll usually be communicating with these SaaS offerings via an API. But if you go the route of building things yourself, you can actually make different architecture decisions when it comes to your server, for example, or the communication between the server and the client, to benefit your end users, or to make things easier for yourself when you are implementing a feature. So let's say that you want to have background jobs, and the SaaS offering that you are using, I'm just using this as a hypothetical. Let's say that the SaaS offering that you are using doesn't allow you to connect via WebSockets, and you are communicating via the API. But your client might have a certain type of structure that makes communication via WebSockets much easier. Then you're going to be at the mercy of the SaaS offering, instead of being able to actually adapt your code base and your architecture to better fit not only your developer experience, but also the user experience. So I could give you other examples. Let's say that you want to build authentication into your web application, and that the SaaS offering only includes, for example, an embed that you can add to your React front end, but you have sort of a different user flow that you want to add to your web application. Let's say that you want to, first of all, let the user only sign up with their email. You want to generate a random password and automatically log them in, and later force them to reset their password if they want to continue using the web application. Again, I'm not really that familiar with these SaaS offerings, but if one of them that you were using didn't allow you to have this exact workflow, then you'd be again at the mercy of the SaaS offering, and by building things yourself, you'd have much more control over the entire web application, which would lead to a much better user again experience, which is very important. Again, at the end of the day, we are building web applications for the end user, but also for yourself as a web developer. The developer experience would be in a way much better, because you wouldn't have to be sort of contorting all of your code and the way you are doing things to let's say please the SaaS offerings way of doing things, so to fit their way of doing things. Instead, you'd be able to have like a cohesive structure of your entire web application. With this being said, these are the pros of being a web developer and the pros of being a SaaS gluer. Again, this is not a moral or a value judgment. You should do what feels right for you and what helps you get closer to your goals. But since on this channel we talk about web development, and this is a trend nowadays in the ecosystem to just use SaaS offerings and glue them together to build a web application, I thought I'd go over here the pros of each one of these approaches. With this being said, I'll see you on the next video.